All right, finally, finally. It was a glitch in the matrix as usual. Gonna wait for everybody to get in before we get started. We got a special show. What's going on, y'all? What's up, David?
Okay.
All right. Had a glitch in the matrix for a second with the live stream.
Okay.
Let me send you over this link.
Okay.
Waiting for some people to come in now. We got 12 people waiting so far.
Okay.
Yep, 12 people in a minute and 15 seconds. We got 14 people. They rolling in now.
Okay, great.
All right, let me get this link for you. Let's see. Okay, I see you pretty good. All right.
Are you sending me the link through Skype or through the email?
I'm gonna send it through Skype.
Okay.
How's everybody doing? Waiting for a few more people to come in. We're gonna get started in about 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes. All right, I'm sending you this through Skype right now. There you go.
Okay. So I can see it.
You can see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a delay though with the sound.
Okay. That's probably because you listen to yourself at the same time. On my end, it's pretty clean, so they should be able to hear you pretty clean. I have you hooked up to a big speaker.
So do I even need to be on YouTube looking at YouTube Live at this point?
Not necessarily, not at all.
Okay.
Mm-mm. Yeah. Oh yeah. So you might want to, if you do have the YouTube up, you might want to just mute the volume in the YouTube.
Yeah, I muted it. That makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. We have 22 people. Hey, what's going on, Quenisha? Who we got? Ari. Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to discuss world citizenship. Just a heads up, we won't be discussing any type of UCC or any type of other related topics except world citizenship. We're going to be covering our world citizenship questions and giving our world citizenship answers. We have Mr. David Gallup in the building, coming straight from Washington, D.C. Okay. All right. So those of you who don't have the call-in line, I'm gonna put it inside the chat box. 25 people. All right, I just put the number inside the chat box, and you guys can start calling in with your questions for Mr. David Gallup right now. How's it going out there in Washington?
Good. Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
We got a lot
We're always busy dealing with not just what's going on here in North America, but all the problems around the world. Flow a lot of problems. Especially, we do a lot of human rights work, exposing human rights violations, helping people to understand what their human rights are, how to claim their human rights more effectively. So obviously, when you look around what's going around the world as well as here in America, it's certainly a lot of violations of rights going on.
Absolutely. That definitely is a global issue.
Yeah.
All right. 1 second, guys.
So, Lorenzo, if you want, I can give a brief introduction to myself and to World Service Authority, if you'd like.
Absolutely.
Okay, sure. Well, so my name is David Gallup. I am a human rights attorney, meaning I so-called practice human rights law. I mean, I don't say that I actually practice law because the work that I do on a day-to-day basis is really more human rights advocacy. That is helping people to understand their rights, helping people, as I mentioned before, claiming their rights, working on specific cases where the help that we provide, usually for free, is to assist the person in making sure that their rights are respected, because if we assist one person in getting their rights respected, that will hopefully help the next set of people who come through in a similar situation to get their rights respected. There are people whose cases we're currently working on pave the way for the next set of people to hopefully not have to suffer the kind of violations that the people we're helping may be going through right now. But so anyway, I've been at World Service Authority for a little over 26 years now. I came on as their chief attorney to create a legal department for the organization to back up the validity of the work that we were doing, both work that we continue to do to promote human rights, to promote world citizenship as a valid legal status, to provide individuals with an understanding or a comprehension and assistance with their ability to use their World Service Authority documents to identify themselves and to travel. That was the main purpose why I came to the organization, and we set up a lot of different processes to help people to do those things and to help people with those processes. Also, back in, I guess it was 1999, I became president of the organization, which meant I put on the hat much more of administrator. So right now, our legal department is staffed by volunteer lawyers and law students from around the world who usually spend 3 to 4 months with us working on human rights cases, helping refugees, stateless people, helping people who carry the world passport, for example, or the world ID card, or the world political asylum card, to understand, once again, comprehend how to use those documents and use them more effectively. So I do a lot of different things with WSA on a day-to-day basis, through social media, with our blog, with, of course, our Twitter and Facebook, and also YouTube. We have our YouTube channel. So we're trying to raise awareness of world citizenship. And this organization was founded by a man named Gary Davis, who back in 1948 renounced his U.S. citizenship after having been a decorated bomber pilot in World War II. He was fed up with the whole war system and said, I need to be a part of a world peace system. So how do I personally make that come to pass? And he said, well, if I'm carrying this document which identifies me as an American, and that means that I might have to kill for that country, why don't I get rid of that document and align myself with humanity and the earth as a whole, which is what he did which back in 1948 was actually a very surprising action to take, to renounce one's nationality, especially after having fought as an Air Force bomber pilot in World War II. And that led to when, of course, as soon as he actually handed in his U.S. passport at the U.S. Embassy in Paris, was given the oath of renunciation, and the second he stepped out of the embassy, he was in France illegally. And for many years, for about 5 or 6 years, he traveled around the world and was always being stopped because he had no documents. So he said, well, I need a governmental authority. I need documentation that represents me as one human. And how do I do that? So this was really the basis of the founding of a world citizen government back in 1953, and then a World Service Authority in 1954 to help him as an individual. And of course, the hundreds of thousands, actually millions now, there's about almost 70 million displaced people, refugees, stateless persons, asylum applicants, people who are internally as well as externally displaced from their birthplaces. And there was many, maybe not that many right after World War II, but almost the same amount. And so there were many people other than Gary Davis who also needed the services of the organization, and many people who continue to need our services. Sometimes the World Passport, for example, can mean the difference between imprisonment and freedom for a refugee who simply has no other document, can't get a document from the government that has persecuted them. They don't want to get a document, obviously, from a government that has persecuted them. So anyway, on a day-to-day basis, we're promoting world citizenship, human rights, establishment of global institutions of law that we as part of humanity can participate in together to make the world a world that works for everybody. Because right now, of course, there's a lot of people who are this world is not working for. They're put in situations of economic depravity. They're put in situations of humiliation. They're put in situations of oppression, and it's those kinds of situations that lead to violence and war. So we're trying to create a world peace through world law system. That's really what World Service Authority's chief function is, to outlaw war and to create the institutions of law in a participatory way that will help us all to live together peacefully. That's really what my job is about every day.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, in a second, I want you to tell. We have a caller calling in right now. I'm going to take the call so you can go ahead and answer the question real quick.
Sure.
Hello. Hello. Yes.
That's Hellraiser.
Yes. How you doing?
Awesome. I'm doing great. Thanks for taking the call. Okay, I have a question for you and David. Can world citizenship exempt you from a military draft? Is that something that he knows, please?
Yeah, well, and I have an interesting story about that. Whether the establishment of that or that claim of world citizenship can get you out of a draft here in the United States, like being a conscientious objector, I'm not sure about, but we would certainly be willing and glad to have our legal department provide you with, for example, a free legal brief to support your right as a quote-unquote world citizen to avoid having to fight other people. But I can give you an actual example of where that did work. There was a young man in Germany and in certain European countries and other countries around the world, military service is actually compulsory, unlike here in the United States where now it's just voluntary. You decide whether you're to join or not, although young men and maybe in the future young women will have to sign up for selective service. It doesn't mean you're going to go to war at all. I mean, unless you volunteer to participate in one of the armed forces. But in Germany, it was required that all young men go and do some, usually a year or two of service to their country, to their government in the armed forces. Well, he wasn't really a conscientious objector in the sense that he was against war, like for religious purposes, for example. He was really against war for philosophical, or you might even say political purposes, which is true for Gary Davis. After he had been in the war, he realized that war is is not winnable for anybody in the long run. So this young man decided to make a statement before the German courts that he would not, as a world citizen, ever want to participate in firing a gun or being in a tank or whatever when it came to harming other human beings. And he actually won his case and did not have to participate in military service. I think he did have to provide some kind of service, sort of like a Peace Corps kind of service where he was helping people and servicing people, but he did not have to wear a military uniform. He did not have to have gun training or anything like that. So that's an actual example of an individual who was able to use world citizenship as a basis to avoid having to participate in the military.
Wow, awesome. Thank you, David. And this is Thomas Hellraiser. Thank y'all. Thank y'all for taking my call.
Appreciate it, Thomas.
Thanks, Thomas.
Thanks a lot.
One thing, well, if no one's begging to answer a quick question, what I should probably do is define world citizenship.
Absolutely.
Okay. World citizenship, citizenship is the rights and responsibilities or duties that we have as individuals to each other and that we have in ourselves. That is, we have certain rights that are innate, that we are born with them, and that are unalienable, meaning we cannot give them up. We can't even really sell them away. And those rights we should respect others with those rights, and we want other people to respect our rights. So one of our duties is to respect other people's rights. I mean, if you go back to natural law, you may say there's three aspects to natural law: do no harm, make sure no harm is done to other people, and keep your word. Yeah. So, I mean, that's almost like the golden rule: do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. So citizenship is about people working together in a particular, you might say, communal framework where those rights and duties are met. So when you add world in front of citizenship, what you're doing is saying that those rights and duties are not just local or national or regional, which they are also, but they're also global, or you might even say universal. And that's why there's a document called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is we provide in multiple copies to people all around the world, that Universal Declaration. And it's a document that affirms our rights wherever we are, you might say, in the universe. I mean, certainly we're planetary, existing in a planetary way right now. And so the point of world citizenship is that we should respect other people's rights and duties, and they should respect ours, where your rights end or where mine begin. So we shouldn't be trampling upon each other's rights. But it's just a question of understanding that whether you're a citizen of your family, a citizen of your city, of your region, of your country, you might say, of the world or the Milky Way galaxy of the universe, you have those rights and they should be respected. And you should respect others. We should be working together as that at that higher level of citizenship. And so that's sort of the basic definition. But really the most important point for, say, Gary Davis and the legacy of what we're continuing at World Service Authority is to say that world citizenship idea is what can help us bring ourselves up to the highest level, the highest tribe, you might say. Why do people fight at lower levels? Because their citizenship status is maybe sometimes unequal, or the power level is unequal. But what's the highest level that we can be? Well, that's human or world citizen. So we say that if you're a world citizen, that means that there will be world laws, including our fundamental human rights, that will be fully enforced. So you could not shoot someone on the streets of Baghdad, or shoot someone on the streets of DC and get away with it just because you're wearing, a military or police uniform. No, that's wrong. War says that if you're wearing a uniform, you might actually be able to kill another human being. It's actually legal in wartime to kill. And we're saying that that's ridiculous in this point, especially in this 21st century, when we know that we have many ways to live together, to sustain each other, to have enough resources for everyone if we use them wisely. So the point of world citizenship now really is to say, look, let's create a common world law, common citizenship, so that fighting will really cease. I mean, not cease, but at least will be dramatically reduced, and the power structure will be changed. It doesn't mean that we're going to get rid of police or our peace force.
1 second.
Probably not. So the point is, though, is coming up with that, you might say, common world law that we can all live together within that framework.
Gotcha.
That's how I put it.
Gotcha. So we got another caller.
Sure.
Okay. What's your name and where you're calling from?
I'm calling from Florida. This is Terry. Quick
Well, we don't encourage people to use the world passport or the world ID card as a driving license or certificate or proof of your right to drive, because that's not really the point of those documents. The point is to help you to exercise your right to identify yourself as an individual before the law, and of course to exercise your right to travel. But that doesn't mean necessarily buy a car or an automobile. But people have told me, and who call, because these are more anecdotal stories, especially when it comes to the World ID card, because it's not something that you stamp. It's plasticized, it's laminated. So it's always people emailing us, sending us letters, or telling us stories over the phone saying, yes, I was able to present my passport or my ID to a police officer, and they said, okay, go on your way. Maybe after just a minimal conversation, but not always. And sometimes you come across, and this is true pretty much with any document or any official, you come across officials who are set on taking their anger or frustration or whatever it is against you in an arbitrary or subjective way, and oftentimes in a discriminatory way. So just because you present a world citizen document like the passport or the world citizen card or the world ID card doesn't mean that will back off, so to speak, a police officer. And having these documents don't also necessarily get rid of any lower level obligation that you might have. So sometimes people contact us and say, oh, I've got child support, I've got spousal support that I owe, and I can't get a U.S. passport. That won't necessarily prevent you from getting a world passport, but it's still having that obligation. It doesn't get rid of that obligation. Still having that obligation, if you go to a port of exit at an airport or land exit, you could still potentially be stopped even with a world passport, because the border official might have access to a computer database where they put your name in and say, oh, you're not supposed to be traveling because you have this debt that you owe, whether it's to the government, to another individual, or whatever else. So certainly the world passport is not a panacea. It's not doesn't solve everybody's problems all the time, or you would have heard of this organization a lot long ago. But it is certainly helpful for people in specific circumstances, people who either really need it, like a refugee or stateless persons, sometimes people who really want it just because they want to promote their status as a world citizen at that highest level and want their rights respected. And then, of course, there's a smattering of people in between who need it for various purposes, whether it's to potentially to sign some agreement, to enter a certain building, to cash their weekly paycheck, whatever it might be that you might need identification for, because of course there's a lot of undocumented people in the world. Even here in the United States, I heard a figure, this was a few years ago, that in the state of Georgia, that almost 40% of all people were undocumented. That means they never even had a birth certificate. And when you got to people who were 65 years or older, it jumped to like 60% of all people who were like 60 years or older in the state of Georgia didn't have even a birth certificate. So you wonder, how do these people go about their day-to-day lives? I mean, I think this was already probably about 10 years ago, and of course, I think people using cash it's much easier to be quote unquote non-documented or non-identified if you can use cash. But even to get a credit card now, you obviously need some other form of identification, or no bank will issue you that document or that card.
What's your name again? Hello? I think we lost him. All right,
Sorry.
next caller. A lot of people in the chat room said they was going to ask that same question. See, the right to travel is a major issue, especially here in America.
Right.
Now, one thing I was going to add to that was, like I said, I'm dealing with the ANPC. As far as the whole international driver's permits and stuff like that, they offer some good products and services to help secure our rights to travel. So in conjunction with the world passports and other certifications, world birth certificate, the world ID cards and the declarations, all that stuff, it helps to use in conjunction with each other. And it just adds an extra layer of security in general, along with other things that we all are interested in, like the Uniform Commercial Code and all the other sovereignty movements and stuff like that.
Well, that's another reason, Lorenzo, why people get the world passport as an alternative tool to whatever other documents they might have. And I do think it's a good idea for people to have multiple sets of documents, and certainly the World Passport is a holistic one. It affirms your rights and you own it versus a national document which is owned by the national government. And if they think you're being subversive, they don't like your politics, they can come knocking on your door and say, sorry, we're taking our document back because it is theirs, they own it. Whereas once a world passport, world ID, or world birth certificate is issued to you, you own it, and it's your responsibility to use it, obviously, according to the laws enforced to respect other people's rights. But the point is that you have it, you own it, and no one should ever legally take it away from you. Now, of course, unless someone's committing a crime, of course, then of course it should be removed from you, because we don't want anyone harming anybody else. That would defeat the purpose of a human rights document. But the really, from my standpoint, the positive side of the documents that World Service Authority issues is the fact that they are inclusive, whereas the nation state documents are exclusive, meaning only people with that citizenship, and maybe not even everybody with that citizenship, can necessarily get the national documents. And traveling in certain parts of the world can actually be dangerous. It can be dangerous to be known as a certain nationality. Can put your life in danger. So to have the World Passport as a backup can be certainly, even or primary, depending upon the person's situation, could be very useful documents. And of course, we think also the philosophical side of it, of bringing people together to see that we are one human family, that we have one earth, and that we should be protecting each other in the earth and not fighting each other. That's the basic premise behind these documents.
Absolutely. What has been the biggest, struggle as far as issue-wise, especially here in America? Well, hold off 1 second, and I'll take this call.
Sure.
Yep.
Sure.
Hello,
THEHAILRAZOR, it's Thomas again from Austin. Thanks for taking my call.
Thomas. How you doing?
I'm doing okay, sir. Hope you and David doing all right. Thanks again for doing this. This is heavy stuff. It's awesome. Now, my question is, what percentage of the general, people who you would have to be dealing with to get through when you're traveling, what percentage of these people and just the general public know about, this whole world citizenship thing and the benefits of it and what it can protect you from? And what are the drawbacks of just, people like us, just regular people, getting this status change? Like, what extra hardship is placed on us as we try to show this new form of identification and walk in the benefits that it gives us?
Okay. Well, percentage-wise, at least here in the United States, it's a small percentage. I mean, under 1% probably of the population who is even aware that World Service Authority exists. I mean, Gary Davis was world famous at one point. He had millions of people sending him postcards and letters and supporting him. In fact, his whole organization took up a whole hotel in Paris between 1949 and 1951. So he was really well known. He was a household name at that point. You could see your great grandparents or grandparents could have seen stories about him on the film newsreels when they went to the theater, when they went to the movie theater. And when he died back in 2013, there was a front page New York Times article about him, about Gary Davis and his life. And it was a really well done article. There were maybe a few minor errors or misconceptions, but overall it was really well done. So if you put in Gary Davis with Gary with 2 R's, Gary Davis, and New York Times obituary, you'll find that article. And I would encourage everybody watching to take a look at that article, because it does give a good understanding of the history behind what we're still working on now. So then one thing I think I always need to mention, which is really important, is that when you get the World Passport, or when you officially, legally, politically claim your world citizenship status and get a world citizen card and certificate, you are not giving up any lower level allegiance. You are still a citizen of Illinois, or a citizen of North America, or a citizen of the earth, okay? You're not giving up those lower levels just because you've added that higher comprehension or that higher awareness. So you still have obligations to those lower levels that you won't necessarily give up, whether it's paying taxes, whether it's abiding by the rules of the road, or whatever it might be. You still have those. So there's no negative or disadvantage of you claiming this status. In fact, I think it raises your philosophical understanding of humanity. Hopefully will help you through your day when dealing with people who are frustrating to you, when you look at them and say, okay, this is not one of my fellow human beings, where you look at them as another human rather than maybe an enemy, for example. Certainly, one of the difficulties that we found, especially in the last couple of years in using, for example, the world passport or other documents, is that in the wealthiest countries, it's very difficult, especially nowadays, for multiple reasons. For example, the downturn in the world economy, which is only just starting to pick back up, the dramatic flow of refugees and displaced persons from Syria, from Afghanistan, Iraq, from Central African Republic, and other hot spots around the world where people are fleeing because they're trying to save their lives. And that's causing a strain on the wealthiest countries where people, of course, would like to end up. Not much of a strain, really. They make it seem way more serious or bigger strain than it really actually is, for what those countries could do to handle even more people coming through. And then probably the final concern is the fear that governments, especially national governments, have over terrorism and maybe traffickers of weapons of mass destruction, because the tools of war have, either fortunately or unfortunately, however you look at it, have been sort of democratized, meaning that anyone with like a cell phone and bomb making capabilities probably can do some pretty serious and scary damage, unfortunately. So policing, of course, around the world becomes even more important, but even more important than that is making sure people's rights and duties are met, because if you make sure people's rights and duties are met, you're not going to get that person who's going to go towards doing something wrong or evil just to lash out because of the humiliation that they might still be suffering. So it's a question of fulfilling people's needs and rights. So I guess one of the concerns in your question is, how do I use this more effectively? So, like, for example, the world passport is best recognized in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America and the Caribbean, in Eastern Europe, and in the Middle East. So I've left out North America and Western Europe because those are the two wealthiest regions of the world. It doesn't mean that you can't use it in those places. It just means that it's hard. And there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to, other than that those countries are certainly more restrictive, and you'll come across officials who may not be aware of it. Although about every 5 to 10 years, we send out a sample world passport with all the information to every single government around the world to let them be aware, to tell them to let their lower level officials down the line in immigration departments, embassies and consulates and foreign affairs departments to be aware that this document does exist, it still exists, and to show multiple copies of stamps from almost 95% of all countries in the world have recognized the world passport by placing visa entry or exit stamps in it. You can see that at our website, worldservice.org/visas, visas.html. But you can just, if you go to worldservice.org on the homepage, you'll see on the top left side it says visas. So you can click on that and see some even recent ones. And there's even ones from the last couple of weeks. Someone got a work permit from Mexico, a man who's biking through Africa on a special bike that allows him to take disabled passengers on his bike, and he got a residence or temporary residency stamp in Uganda as he makes his way through African countries. So there's stamps I haven't even put up on the website yet that we have to do in the next few weeks that are even more recent than the most recent one I think is from Ecuador, which was from May or something, April or May. Anyway, so advantages. Well, by the way, if you contact us, we do have a whole actual list that says the differences between the world passport and the national passport. There's 16 different reasons why some people might want to get the world passport in addition or instead of even the national passport. I don't encourage or discourage that. I think you should, if you can get both, why not get both? Right. But one of the, probably like I said earlier, the biggest advantages of having these documents is in a situation where, for some scary, horrible situation, like here in the United States, if the government clamps down and shuts all the borders and builds up walls, and you can't for some reason get a U.S. passport, or they stop issuing them, if you don't have anything to identify yourself with, no official wants to stamp your hand. So to have this document as the backup, even if it sits in your drawer for a couple of years or whatever, it's sort of like people who decide, okay, I'm going to fill my cupboard with extra water and extra canned goods or something, because in case that I might need it, because either the power's out or there's some major catastrophe, I'll be able to have that as a backup. because of course, if there was a major electrical issue, and that would be a problem for us probably too in the end for producing passports at that point. But anyway, to have this as in addition to whatever other documents you might already have is a great advantage. Not even talking about the philosophical, which I like to talk about. Of course, the philosophical reason why you might want to get this.
I'm gonna add to that. To your answer to it. For basically, what he's saying is, just because you're a holder of a world passport or you claimed your world citizenship, that's between you, yourself, and your creator, and that's just your claim to the world. Sharing that with the world. But that doesn't exempt you from whatever type of legal attachments you have with any other corporation called a state or a country. If you do have contracts with these people, such as driver's licenses, such as birth certificates, such as social security cards, we still have to go through our process to, unplug out of those different matrices as well. We're still responsible for those, to unplug ourselves from those different contractual agreements. Yeah, but
that was perfect. I had like 3 or 4 other answers to questions that I didn't even ask, all just given right there. And I'll definitely go to that website and check that out. But thank y'all so much.
Absolutely. To you and everybody else, everybody that's already a part of the HAILRAZOR Legacy Group, that's already a member, you guys will notice that we have a special tab at the top linking you directly to the world government authorities.
I saw that. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. I'll check that out.
Exactly. All right. See you on the inside, bro.
All right. Thanks, guys.
And I can tell you that we will be, I'm hoping, within the next 6 months updating our website, because right now it is a little bit hard to maneuver. It was a great website 10 years ago, but right now it's a little bit hard to use. So I would encourage anyone watching or listening to reach out to us just simply by email, info@worldservice.org. The reason why is if you email us, there's a lot of information just that we can send back as PDFs in a reply email, a text within the email that explains the whole process for applying for the world passport and the ID and world citizenship and all. And that's all laid out. But then in addition to that, we can email you the forms that you can print out or even fill out on your computer, as well as we have a flyer we call our How to Participate flyer, which gives suggestions to everyone out there in the world about how you can help us to promote the idea of world citizenship and promote actual, you might say, participation in action of being a world citizen. What does that mean and how do we do it? So if people will reach out to us by email, even if they don't want to take the time to go to the website, that's perfectly fine. We can send them whatever they might need or answer whatever questions. And sometimes it does, because we do get hundreds of emails every day. Sometimes it does take a couple days for us to reply, but you will sooner or later get a reply from our staff.
Absolutely. We got some people inside the chat room. I'm gonna copy and paste the link directly there, just in case they're not members of the HAILRAZOR Legacy right now, so they can have that. And okay, all right, guys. So I just posted the link in the chat. If you're already a member of the HAILRAZOR Legacy Group, it's right at the top of the page, towards the right. Yes, Kenneth Moore. Yeah, it is a lot of information because it's a lot going on in the world in general, and that's why we can't afford not to spread the word about these particular issues and these particular options, especially if we have major organizations like this here to help back up and help us secure and protect our rights as these human beings in general. Okay, so Kenneth Moore asks on the chat, is membership free? It's not necessarily a membership. The World Service Authorities pretty much offer services, just like the typical services we have, in this typical America. You go down to the courthouse or whatever to get a birth certificate. You go to the Social Security Administration to get your Social Security card. You go to the DMV or BMV to get your driver's license. The World Service Authority happens to offer multiple of these different types of documents except up under another status, like the world service birth certificates, the world government passports, the world government birth certificate cards, the world citizenship cards. You see what I mean? It's just different variations of different services and products. to help us along our path of, of freedom and, pretty much claiming our rights.
And I think that's you explain that excellently, Lorenzo. I just to follow up or sort of really reiterate what you just said. World Service Authority, we actually are a nonprofit organization in Washington, D.C. The only funding we get is through the service fees, the fees that we would charge for issuance of documents, plus small, very small, usually donations. We need a lot bigger donations, but small donations from individuals all around the world. We don't have any government, any corporation, any foundation supporting what we do, which the beauty of that is the only people that we really have to be concerned about or accommodate is the global public who comes to us for help. So we don't have to worry about what some foundation is begging us or demanding us to do, which is kind of nice. The negative, of course, from our standpoint, is that there's a lot more that we would like to do. We've got a lot of projects and programs that are really on hold, like our World Court of Human Rights project, like our World Guards project, that we just don't have funding for. And until we get some major donors or supporters who like what we do, or even venture capitalists who are willing to invest in what we're trying to do, it's hard for us to really make the kind of dramatic impact once again in the world, sort of that Gary Davis did back in the late 1940s. And now's the time. I mean, we want to be building unity, not walls. That's one of our slogans for our collegial foundation that we've created. And now's a perfect time for World Service Authority to be the counterpoint to all this separation and divisiveness. I mean, even what we saw here, not far from here, in Charlottesville over the weekend. I mean, it's frightening that we've separated ourselves. We've ignored the humanity of ourselves, like thinking that one group of people is somehow better than another group of people. No, we're all equal, and to see that here on the national level, of course, it's been there, but it's scary when we see it. But it's happening everywhere else in the world, dramatically too. I mean, look what's going on in Syria. It's been going on for 7 years now. Is this local fighting, which doesn't have to happen in this world, in this beautiful world with all these resources. It's just a question of disrespect, I would say, really, for the rule of law. And once again, that's partly due to rights and duties not being met for many people who then lash out, or governments themselves trying to clamp down on the population because the people in power are, you might say, totalitarian or dictators or whatever, and who want to keep their power regardless of whether it's going to violate the rights of the population there. So we're talking some heady issues here. I mean, if you want to go back and read that relates to this issue, I wrote a blog called "How Do We End or How Do We Stop War?" So it's a few blogs back in our World Citizen blog, but you can put in "How Do We End War" by David Gallup, World Citizen blog, and you should be able to find it online, or it's at garydavis.blogspot.com, and it's a few blogs back. But anyway. It's frustrating that we're living in such a divisive time when it seemed like for many years that we were moving towards a sort of that global understanding of each other. Now all of a sudden it seems to have flipped back, or that maybe that global understanding was really not based upon much of anything but just hope, which obviously is not enough. It can't just be hope. It has to be law and institutions that we develop and build.
Gotcha. Okay, we have somebody that's trying to call in. Actually, we have a concern. Mr. Earl Jones, he said he had an issue in 2010 trying to get to Jamaica, and I guess he got stuck or whatever. And I don't know how different things were from here now in 2010, but I'm asking him right now, did he order a visa before he went?
Yeah, it's important to get a visa ahead of time at the consulate prior to going to the airport, because even if they say, oh, you're an American, you don't need a visa. Well, when you're traveling on a world passport, you're traveling as a world citizen, a human being. You might need a visa. And although you might get out of the country on this end, getting into that next country without the stamp is not a good choice to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I wanted to make sure that was clear because, hello?
Sure.
Yes, hello?
Yes, is this Earl?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so yeah, I was asking, did you actually order your visa before you actually made your trip?
No, when I went, I had everything put on my passport. But what they were saying was, like, when I went to the booth, the lady just looked at me, was like, um, I don't know about that country code, something wrong with the country code. And I just looked at her like, well, what do you mean? Are you, yeah,
Yep, you still with me?
yeah, I'm still here.
Yep. So you say the country code.
Now, when I went, I mean, when I went to out to Washington to get my world passport, the problem was, um, no, I didn't have a problem at the world passport place because I got my passport, I got a world political asylum card, I got the birth certificate, like I got everything that I could get.
Hmm.
And once I got to the airport, it was they gave me the problem stating that something's wrong with the country code and you got to step to the side. And next thing I know, a couple of officers came, and escorted me to, I guess, their little detainee section
Yeah.
and started asking me questions. And so I called Dave, I think that was his name, who I called while I was there, and he spoke to the police, the officers and everything,
Hmm.
and they still just was like, no, you can't go.
Okay, so I'll let David clarify the proper procedures when before traveling.
Sure.
One second.
Well, um, is it okay for me to start?
Hmm.
Okay, sure. So, when you're using the world passport, like any document, you really, and on preparation for any trip, you do need to be prepared, meaning you need to know what the obligations are uh, for you as that kind of traveler going to another part of the world. Because even as a quote unquote American, you may need to get a visa to go to a certain country. Like on the US passport, you have to get a visa from the Indian government, or actually from their visa service, to go to Mumbai, for example, or to go to Rio in Brazil. You can't just get on a plane and go. Even as an American, you have to contact the nearest consulate, which is usually in the biggest city near you. I mean, if you're in Chicago, there's probably a consulate for both India and Brazil. But if you're in a smaller city, maybe in Indianapolis, maybe there wouldn't be. So you might need to go either in person if you can, or by mail. Send in your document with a completed application form for the visa. There will probably be a non-refundable, although sometimes refundable, visa issuance fee that you would send sometimes in a money order, depending upon what they'll accept, or a personal check or business check. And that could be anywhere from $50 to $150, depending upon the country. And you fill it out, you send it in, hopefully, if you're mailing it in, they'll mail it back, your passport, with the appropriate stamp in it. Or if they don't stamp it, they should give you a legal reason why they've rejected it, because all governments, at least member states of the United Nations, are bound to respect the fundamental human right to freedom of travel. Meaning that if you're simply trying to exercise your right to travel, and that's the main reason why you're going, whether it's for business, for pleasure, not because you're fleeing having committed some crime, that government should issue you the stamp in your passport, or confirm one way or another that upon arrival on the next frontier you'll be let in. But it's really not a good idea to wait until the very last minute to get to when you're upon arrival to get in, because once again the official might say, well, I don't care what they told you over the phone at the consulate. If they didn't give you a stamp, then I haven't seen this document before. I don't know whether it's valid. I don't want to take the risk of losing my job just to let you in if I'm not supposed to. That's why if you have that visa, and I don't mean the international exit visa that World Service Authority issues in people's documents to affirm that right to leave a country. I'm talking about the entry visa, the tourist visa, the business visa, the student visa, the spousal or marriage visa, whatever kind of visa it is that you need, that you should get before leaving your country and trying to go to the next country, especially before getting on a plane, because there's four things that could happen if you try to get on a plane and you don't have the visa ahead of time. The airline could say no because they could be fined thousands of dollars just by having put you, having put you on a plane and then having to deport you back if the country doesn't let you in at the frontier. But say the airline says yes. TSA or their similar organization in any other country that's the security administration could say, well, we don't care if the airline said yes to you. They're just taking your money as a business. We're the government. We don't want it. We don't see a stamp. But the airline and TSA could say yes. Third party, which is Customs and Border Patrol, could actually come running down the airline gateway to find you at the airplane and say, I'm sorry, sir or ma'am, TSA and the airline shouldn't have let you board. We don't want you traveling with these documents. In fact, if you are a U.S. citizen or non-citizen national, you are required by law to carry a U.S. passport or non-citizen's passport. That law came into effect in June of 2009. So you actually could be violating national law by not, in addition, say, to the world passport, because you can have that. They're not mutually exclusive. But if you don't also have that national document, now, of course, some people maybe cannot get one. Anyway, so the third is the Customs and Border Patrol. And finally, without a visa ahead of time, stamped in your world passport, even if the airline, TSA, and Customs and Border Patrol let you through, when you arrive at that next frontier, if they don't see it and they're not sure about it, they could say, no, we're sorry, we're not going to let you in, and then send you back. So it's really important, and I've done a YouTube video on our YouTube channel, which is YouTube/user/World Service Official, I think is our YouTube URL. And there it's called the 10 P's of passport usage. But I'm not going to go through that right now because that alone could be a half-hour discussion. The 10 P's, the letter P, like being peaceful, polite, professional, persuasive, persistent, patient, etc. It's an explanation. It does take about 50 minutes or so to see that whole video, but it does give an explanation of really how to be prepared. And I would say there's a book that Gary Davis wrote called, I don't know if you can see that without the glare, it's called Passport to Freedom, which is a wonderful book in addition to his autobiography, My Country is the World, that does do this Passport to Freedom does give a great explanation of how do we deal with bureaucracies who are standing in our way? How do we overrule, you might say, those bureaucracies who try to block us from claiming our human rights. Now, of course, some of the things he did when this book was written, you would probably get arrested for right now. I mean, because of the dramatic controls that Homeland Security and the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative have put into place, that, he was able to, because he was a pilot, he was able to sometimes get onto airplanes because he talked up the pilots and they just let him go through, even if he didn't have the proper documents. I don't think that would happen anymore. But there's still a lot of important information in this book, which you can either get through Amazon or you can get through our website, worldservice.org, on our online catalog. You can pay by PayPal, for example. Anyway, but it's a great, it's subtitled, A Guide for World Citizens, a guide for us as world citizens, how to claim our human rights.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so Earl, appreciate you calling in. Any other concerns or questions?
Oh, boy, actually, sorry, one more point about this. If your rights are violated, the next step to do, even if you've gone through this process and gotten a visa potentially, or if you were rejected a visa, this is when we want you to contact our legal department to send us an email, preferably, with the full details of the who, what, when, where, why, and how your rights were violated, how your documents weren't respected, and then we will jump into action. Hopefully we can. Can't always do this immediately because it's like a triage system. The most serious cases get handled first. But anyway, our intention is to draft a legal statement to affirm your rights and to help you to use your documents from then on.
Gotcha. Appreciate that. Okay, what was that, Earl? Hello, Earl?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, so what was that last statement you made?
That I have that international exit visa that I got from them. Yeah, it says international exit visa with their stamp and stuff on it. And I have the international residence permit because I went and got me this is way back in 2010 that we did this, start doing this stuff, and they wouldn't accept it. Like I had the UPS box at my address.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I said, I have the international. Can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you.
Okay.
Now I know the international visa permit is dealing with just securing your right to reside within a certain area wherever you live in. Pretty much helping secure your jurisdiction between you and the city, county, or state within that you live in. Am I right about that, David?
I'm sorry, I was typing something into the chat, but what was the last part?
He said he had the international visa as well as the international resident visa, and I was saying the international resident visa pretty much helps assist in securing as far as wherever he actually lives, as far as
Right. It's the point is to leave where you currently are, because believe it or not, there's some governments that will restrict you just from leaving your own country, and that is a fundamental human right. If you want to leave, you should be able to. But that doesn't necessarily mean you'll get into the specific country you want to get into. It may be your rights may be rejected, especially if you haven't planned ahead and spoken to that government to determine what are their rules and regulations for going there.
Right, and also I have that I put my apostille on here as well.
Right. So that can be an apostille can be useful. I'm sorry, what was he saying?
You say what, Ro?
I also have my on one of the pages, the affiliation, diplomatic, corporation, organization, firms, a page that they gave me, and on that page I have my apostille that I had from the state of New Jersey.
So yeah, an apostille can be useful because it confirms in another part of the world that's party to the Hague Convention on Apostilles that at least your certification, say of the document, should be recognized elsewhere, and it does give an air of more authority to it. But even that, once again, no matter what document you might show to anybody, an official has that power at that time to say yes or no to you. I mean, every individual official, border, immigration, foreign ministry, consular, etc., has that arbitrary and subjective discretion. And sometimes just simply because they're having a bad day, they can take their anger or frustration out on you as the traveler, and then you can't go where you want to or need to go. But so separate from having the ex visa or having an apostille or even your diplomatic status in the passport, getting in addition the actual recognition from that consulate prior to travel is really important. It's crucial in many circumstances. Now, once you're in a certain part of the world, say you're in Honduras and you want to go to Nicaragua, once you're there by bus or by car or by bicycle or whatever, you may be able to go to the frontier because you're already in that region of the world because you're not flying. And there you might be able to get an entry stamp pretty easily at a frontier. But because we're talking about international air travel, that's when having the visa ahead of time really becomes crucial.
Gotcha.
My thing is, what was the issue with the country code?
Okay, well, so the world passport uses a code WSA, which although we've submitted that to the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is the organization that sets the standards for that, we can't control how governments implement that in their database system or their computer system at frontiers. So you simply can tell an official, look, it appears that the scanner wasn't working right. Can you just enter my information manually? So you just ask them. They might not be happy about it, but that is their job, is to take note of who's coming through so they can just hand type the data. It should work. It is machine printed and machine readable, but it doesn't always work. And that code WSA, which is what you might call the country code, but for us, our country is the world. It could be that certain computer systems have not updated to show that in it, which is not a problem with the code itself. It's the problem with those governments that haven't really taken into account all the different documents that exist around the world and that have been recognized and should continue to be recognized on a human rights level.
So basically, it boils down to the world government and the world government authorities have done everything they need to do to notify all officials, all countries, about the world passports and all the certifications. But considering that only 1% of the world knows about the world government and world citizenship, it's hard to kind of, it's hard to pretty much stand on that if you have one individual person at the gate that's trying to give you a hard time. You see what I mean? Because it's not a lot of awareness of it in general. So no matter what,
Basically, what they were saying, the lady was, she looked at it, she swiped it, then she swiped it again, and she just was like, could you step to the side for a minute, please? And that's when she sent the boys to come and get me, and they was like, well, we gotta talk to you to the side. I'm like, oh. And they pulled me into they didn't pull me into the room. They just took me to where their little window was, like where you could speak through the window and talk to them. And that's when I called Dave, because I had his card in my wallet. And then that's when they was like, you know what, there's a bad country code. There's no way he's not leaving this airport. That's what they said to Dave. So they definitely wouldn't let me out.
Yeah, it's frustrating to us too. I mean, that's an outright violation of his human rights. I mean, unless there was some obligation or duty that he may have had that we're not sure about right now, that could have, caused that official to stop him. If he was just simply trying to exercise his right to leave, they should have let him leave. But once again, and this was actually, what happened with him was after that law that came into effect in 2009. So it could be that they were acting against him in a more harsh way because they were trying to get the law to be effectively implemented, you might say. So they could have treated him in a harsher way than had it been 2 or 3 years earlier where the law didn't even exist.
okay, Earl. Hey, stay tuned, Earl. I gotta let another caller in.
Okay, my bad. Okay.
Appreciate the call in. All right. Yeah, that's the whole point of bringing us, trying to bring more awareness, to the movement, to the world, world government, the whole concept of world citizenship, because that is the main reason I think